All right, so we're back for part two of Lamb to the Slaughter by Roald Dahl. So just to kind of review yesterday, we have Mary Maloney and her husband Patrick Maloney. Those are our characters. We know that Mary Maloney is pregnant, 6 months, and her husband came home from work. He's a detective, and he seemed very agitated. He ended up sharing some sad news with his wife, letting her know that he was having an affair, but not to worry, that her and the baby will be taken care of. Mary Maloney is in a state of shock at this point and still says, you know what, I'm going to go downstairs and find us something to eat. She goes down, she finds a frozen leg of lamb, brings it upstairs, and he tells her, I'm not eating. So whatever, like, I'm going to go out. And wasn't happy with her. She clearly isn't happy with him. She takes the leg of lamb and she hits him upside the head with it, killing him. Okay, so that's kind of where we left off. So I'm going to reread the last part that we were on yesterday, right up here. She carried the meat into the kitchen and placed it in a pan, turned the oven on high and shoved it inside. Then she washed her hands and ran upstairs to the bedroom. She sat down before the mirror, tidied her hair, and touched up her lips and face. She tried to smile. It came out rather peculiar. She tried again. Hello, Sam, she said brightly aloud. The voice sounded peculiar, too. I want some potatoes, please, Sam. Yes, and I think a can of peas. That was better. Both the smile and the voice were coming out better now. She rehearsed it several times more. Then she ran downstairs, took her coat, and went out the back door, down the garden, and into the street. It wasn't 6 o'clock yet, and the lights were still on in the grocery shop. So she is rehearsing a conversation that she is going to have. Now, I want you guys to think about that. Why would she be leaving her house after she killed her husband to go get groceries? Okay, so think about that. Hello, Sam, she said brightly, smiling at the man behind the counter. Why, good evening, Mrs. Maloney. How are you? I want some potatoes, please, Sam. Yes, and I think a can of peas. The man turned and reached up behind him on the shelf for the peas. Patrick's decided he's tired and doesn't want to eat out tonight, she told him. We usually go out on Thursdays, you know, and now he's caught me without any vegetables in the house. Then how about meat, Mrs. Maloney? No, I've got meat, thanks. I got a nice leg of lamb from the freezer. Oh, I don't know much about cooking it frozen, Sam, but I'm taking a chance on it this time. You think it'll be all right? Personally, the grocer said, I don't believe it makes any difference. You want these Idaho potatoes? Oh, yes, that'll be fine. 2 of those. Anything else? The grocer cocked his head on one side, looking at her pleasantly. How about afterwards? What are you going to give him for afterwards? Well, what would you suggest, Sam? The man glanced around his shop. How about a nice big slice of cheesecake? I know he likes that. Perfect, she said. He loves it. And when it was all wrapped and she had paid, she put on her brightest smile and said, Thank you, Sam. Good night. Good night, Mrs. Maloney, and thank you. And now she told herself as she hurried back all she was doing now. She was returning home to her husband, and he was waiting for his supper, and she must cook it good and make it as tasty as possible because the poor man was tired. And if, when she entered the house, she happened to find anything unusual or tragic or terrible, then naturally it would be a shock, and she'd become frantic with grief and horror. Mind you, she wasn't expecting to find anything. She was just going home with the vegetables. Mrs. Patrick Maloney going home with the vegetables on Thursday evening to cook supper for her husband. That's the way, she told herself. Do everything right and natural. Keep things absolutely natural, and there'll be no need for any acting at all. So the reason why she was rehearsing was because she knew that she needed an alibi for when she had to call the police to let them know that he was dead. That's the way, she told herself. Do everything natural. So if she is pretending like she's natural, she's hoping that the police will buy her story. Therefore, when she entered the kitchen by the back door, she was humming a little tune to herself and smiling. Patrick, she called. How are you, darling? She put the parcel down on the table and went through into the living room. And when she saw him lying there on the floor with legs doubled up and one arm twisted back underneath his body, it really was rather a shock. All the old love and longing for him welled up inside her, and she ran over to him, knelt down beside him, and began to cry her heart out. It was easy. No acting was necessary. A few minutes later, she got up and went to the phone. She knew the number of the police station, and when the man on the other end answered, she cried to him, "Quick! Come quick! Patrick's dead!" "Who's speaking?" "Mrs. Maloney, Mrs. Patrick Maloney." "You mean Patrick Maloney's dead?" "I think so," she sobbed. "He's lying on the floor, and I think he's dead." "Be right over," the man said. The car came very quickly, and when she opened the front door, two policemen walked in. She knew them both. She knew nearly all of the men at that precinct, and she fell right into the chair, and then went over to join the other one, who was called O'Malley, kneeling by the body. "Is he dead?" she cried. "I'm afraid he is. What happened?" Briefly, she told her story about going out to the grocer and coming back to find him on the floor. While she was talking, crying and talking, Noonan discovered a small patch of congenial blood on the dead man's head. He showed it to O'Malley, who got up at once and hurried to the phone. Soon other men began to come into the house. First a doctor, then two detectives, one of whom she knew by name. Later, a police photographer arrived and took pictures, and a man who knew about fingerprints. There was a great deal of whispering and muttering beside the corpse, and the detectives kept asking her a lot of questions, but they always treated her kindly. She told her story again, this time right from the beginning, when Patrick had come in. And she was sewing, and he was tired, so tired he hadn't wanted to go out for supper. She told how she'd put the meat in the oven. It's there now cooking, and how she'd stepped out to the grocer for vegetables and came back to find him lying on the floor. "Which grocer?" one of the detectives asked. She told him, and he turned and whispered something to the other detective, who immediately went outside into the street. In 15 minutes, he was back with a page of notes, and there was more whispering, and through her sobbing, she heard a few of the whispered phrases. Acted quite normal, very cheerful, wanted to give him a good supper, peas, cheesecake. Impossible that she... After a while, the photographer and the doctor departed, and two other men came in and took the corpse away on a stretcher. Then the fingerprint man went away. The two detectives remained, and so did the two policemen. They were exceptionally nice to her, and Jack Noonan asked if she wouldn't rather go somewhere else, to her sister's house perhaps, or to his own wife, who would take care of her and put her up for the night. No, she said. She didn't feel she could move even a yard at the moment. Would they mind awfully if she stayed just where she was until she felt better? She didn't feel too good at the moment. She really didn't. Then, hadn't she better lie down on the bed? Jack Noonan asked. No, she said. She'd like to stay right where she was, in the chair. A little later, perhaps, when she felt better, she would move. So they left her there while they went about their business, searching the house. Occasionally, one of the detectives asked her another question. Sometimes Jack Noonan spoke at her gently as he passed by. Her husband, he told her, had been killed by a blow on the back of the head, administered with a heavy, blunt instrument, almost certainly a large piece of metal. They were looking for the weapon. The murderer may have taken it with him, but on the other hand, he may have thrown it away or hidden it somewhere on the premises. It's the old story, he said. Get the weapon and you got the man. Later, one of the detectives came up and sat beside her. Did she know, he asked, of anything in the house that could have been used as a weapon? Would she mind having a look around to see if anything was missing? A very big spanner, for example, or a heavy metal vase? They didn't have any heavy metal vases, she said, or a big spanner. She didn't think they had a big spanner, but there might be some things like that in the garage. The search went on. She knew that there were other policemen in the garden all around the house. She could hear their footsteps on the gravel outside, and sometimes she saw a flash of a torch through a chink in the curtains. It began to get late, nearly 9, she noticed by the clock on the mantel. The 4 men searching the room seemed to be growing weary, a trifle exasperated. Jack, she said, the next time Sergeant Noonan went by, would you mind giving me a drink? Sure, I'll give you a drink. You mean this whiskey? Yes, please, but just a small one. It might make me feel better. He handed her the glass. Why don't you have one yourself, she said. You must be awfully tired. Please do. You've been very good to me. Well, he whispered, it's not strictly allowed, but I might take just a drop to keep me going. One by one, the others came in and were persuaded to take a little nip of whiskey. They stood around rather awkwardly with the drinks in their hands, uncomfortable in her presence, trying to say consoling things to her. Sergeant Noonan wandered into the kitchen, came out quickly, and said, "Look, Mrs. Maloney, you know that oven of yours is still on, and the meat is still inside." "Oh, dear me," she cried, "so it is. I'd better turn it off for you, hadn't I?" "Will you do that, Jack? Thank you so much." When the sergeant returned the second time, she looked at him with her large, dark, tearful eyes. "Jack Noonan," she said. "Yes." "Would you do me a small favor, you and these others?" "We can try, Mrs. Maloney." "Well," she said, "here you all are, and good friends of dear Patrick's too, and helping to catch the man who killed him. You must be terribly hungry by now, because it's long past your supper time, and I know Patrick would never forgive me, God bless his soul, if I allowed you to remain in this house without offering you decent hospitality. Why don't you eat up that lamb that's in the oven? It'll be cooked just right by now." "Wouldn't dream of it," Sergeant Noonan said. "Please," she begged, "please eat it. Personally, I couldn't touch a thing, certainly not what's been in the house when he was here. But it's all right for you. It'd be a favor to me if you'd eat it up. Then you can go on with your work again afterwards." There was a good deal of hesitating among the four policemen, but they were clearly hungry, and in the end they were persuaded to go into the kitchen and help themselves. The woman stayed where she was, listening to them, speaking among themselves, their voices thick and sloppy because their mouths were full of meat. "Have some more, Charlie." "No, better not finish it. She wants us to finish it. She said so. Be doing her a favor." "Okay, then, give me some more." "That's a hell of a big club that guy must have used to hit poor Patrick," one of them was saying. "The doc says his skull was smashed all to pieces, just like from a sledgehammer. That's why it ought to be easy to find. Exactly what I say. Whoever done it, they're not going to be carrying a thing like that around with them longer than they need." One of them belched. "Personally, I think it's right here on the premises. Probably right under our very noses. What do you think, Jack?" And in the other room, Mary Maloney giggled. So ultimately, she was able to pull it off. The murder weapon, being the lamb, was fed to the police officers. Okay, so like I told you guys to start, the stories by Roald Dahl, the adult ones, are very interesting, kind of morbid, but still very, very clever. And two, I want you guys to realize that this is a short story. It was very well developed, but it wasn't long and drawn out. Okay, so if we were in class, I would have you guys start outlining your short stories using the elements of plot. But because we're not in school, we're going to do something a little bit different later on after we read through some of the other stories. So on tomorrow's agenda, you guys will have to fill out just the 3 things that I have for you, not a lot. And then the following day, I'm going to have a link on the agenda where you guys can actually watch a short film of The Lamb to the Slaughter. It's not anything really graphic or anything. So I'm going to put the link out because I do think that it does give a good visual of what actually happened in the story. I'm not going to have you do any other assignment with this, but the video is well worth the watch. So I'll be interested to hear what you guys thought about the story. All right. See you next time.